investment in water, sanitation and hygiene helps change lives, helps save lives, and helps economies recover and prosper. The Sanitation and Water for All partnership, together with UNICEF, the World Bank, and the Asian Development Bank, welcome you to this important global meeting. Thank you for joining us. All around the world, investment is making a difference. In Vietnam, tourism benefited.
Thành phố Nha Trang là một trong thành phố trọng đầu những năm 2000 đứng trước cái cơ hội thuận lợi mới để phát triển ngành du lịch của tỉnh Khánh Hòa. Thì lãnh đạo tỉnh đã chấp thuận cái dự án đầu tư về cái cải thiện vệ sinh môi trường thành phố Nha Trang cái giai đoạn 2007-2014. Trong đó đặc biệt năm 2019 vừa qua thì Khánh Hòa đã đón 6,2 triệu lượt khách du lịch, trong đó trên 3,6 triệu lượt khách quốc tế và doanh thu của ngành du lịch đã đạt 27.200 tỷ đồng.
In Nigeria, water, sanitation and hygiene initiatives continue to have a positive impact on education.
So, since the intervention of WASH, the population of the school has been increased from 152 to 245. The academic have been improved because some of them used to run home before, but now there was no diseases. They stay in their classes.
In Brazil, economic investment would benefit society.
Quando a gente olha para o Brasil, a gente percebe que aproximadamente 100 milhões de pessoas não têm acesso ao esgoto tratado. Quando a gente olha para pessoas sem água, nós olhamos para uma população equivalente a 35 milhões de pessoas no Brasil. Se a gente imagina, criasse uma situação hipotética de Brasil saneado, uma meta a ser perseguida, aonde remontam investimentos da ordem de 450 bilhões, retornariam à sociedade algo superior a 1 trilhão de reais.
In India, clean water projects changes lives.
Earlier, collecting water was a big headache for all women. We couldn't take any job because we were waiting to collect water, which could be delivered at any time. Because of this, the school attendance of children was also affected. After this project was approved, the overall economic status has improved. Now we are able to send our children to school all the time.
Global and regional partnerships are vital.
The African Development Bank invests in water supply, sanitation and hygiene due to their centrality to poverty reduction, the achievement of socio-economic development objectives for Africa, as well as achievement of the SDGs.
I urge finance ministers and heads of state to take water as a priority topic and take it to the top of their policy agendas. Only in this way would we prevent a complete negative impact on the health of populations and the economic development of nations.
Investments in basic water and sanitation services in developing countries have been shown to have benefit to cost ratios as high as 7-to-1, according to the OECD, because of their positive impacts on health, education and nutrition. The benefit to cost ratio can be raised even higher if wastewater is treated as a resource and recycled.
Today, you have the chance to make a difference. Investing in water, sanitation and hygiene has never been more important. Together, we can reduce malnutrition, liberate women and girls, boost economies, increase school attendance, mitigate climate change, and improve healthcare worldwide. Be part of the conversation. Be part of the solution.
Honourable Ministers, dear co-conveners, heads of UN agencies and other agencies, dear partners and excellencies. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this third and final of the 2020 series of SWA virtual and regional finance ministers meetings. It is a great pity, of course, that we are not able to meet in person right now due to the pandemic that is making all our lives so much harder. So we are, however, glad that this has provided us an opportunity to hold an online version which allows more people and specifically more ministers to join the conversation. The meetings, this series of meetings, the meetings are convened by the Sanitation and Water for All Global Partnership and some of its key partners. Globally, these are UNICEF and the World Bank Water Global Practice, but at the regional level, this meeting and this concrete meeting is being co-hosted or co-convened by the Asian Development Bank, and we will hear from representatives of all these partners today. Before we start, let me get the housekeeping out of the way. This meeting will be in Spanish, in French, and in English, with simultaneous interpretation between the three languages. For those of you who are speaking and making interventions during this meeting, you have already been briefed about the language settings. For those listening in, you will have selected your language when you logged in. There are also closed captions, both in English, in Spanish, and also in French, at the bottom of your screen. If you have any problems, please write in the chat box of the platform that you are using, and there will be one of my colleagues there to help you. Finally, on language, two of our ministers from Vietnam and from Nepal will be speaking in their national languages, and they will only be interpreted into English. We only have 120 minutes for this meeting, and we want to have a lively exchange of ideas. So I would like to urge all of you to keep your interventions as short and meaningful as possible so that we can allow as many people as possible an opportunity to speak. We were told that we are having a good problem, which has lots of honorable ministers attending the meeting. This means that everybody will want to speak and the time is limited. We will prioritize ministers in giving them the right to speak, as this is your meeting. So, with the housekeeping done, this meeting is first and foremost an opportunity for a discussion between finance ministers, reflecting on the critical importance of water, of sanitation, and of hygiene for social, for economic, for development, and also for health. So for all the great challenges we have experienced over the last few months, we have seen an increased interest in water, in sanitation, and in hygiene, in particular for making services available, accessible, and affordable and sustainable for all, always, and everywhere. We came a long way, as we can see by the attendance at this meeting and the intensive preparatory meetings prior to this meeting. Ministers of Finance and their teams are invested in the water and sanitation sector, and we believe that they are able to unblock some of the constraints, to increase finance in the sector, to reform tariffs and subsidies, to support more efficient performance of the sector, and also to access green climate funds. Our partners know that actions speak louder than words. More than 50 governments and several civil society organizations, donors, private sector, etc., have tabled around or more than 300 commitments to the SWA Mutual Accountability Mechanism. And we invite the Honorable Finance Ministers to join their sector counterparts in resourcing the achievement of these nationally driven commitments. I will now introduce the speakers making the opening remarks, and then I will hand over to our moderator to hear directly from the finance ministers of Fiji, Indonesia, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. We are very fortunate to have so many high-level speakers to open this meeting today. And I will start with Ms. Henrietta Fore, who is the Executive Director of UNICEF, who could not be with us today, unfortunately, but she shared with us a video message. Can you please?
On behalf of UNICEF, welcome everyone to this virtual finance ministers meeting. UNICEF is proud to be standing here today with Sanitation and Water for All, the World Bank and our other convening partners. and of course with finance ministers from around the region. This meeting brings us together at a unique moment in history. The challenges facing us are stark. Even before this pandemic, too many people around the world lacked access to wash services. Now the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed these weaknesses and inequalities in a dramatic way. Inequalities are deepening, and with a global economic recession on the horizon, governments will be under enormous fiscal pressure. They may not be able to fund social programs to the extent needed. This represents a huge threat, not only to development progress, but to social stability. A lasting, sustainable, and peaceful recovery depends on using this extraordinary moment to reimagine a better, more equal world. As we recover from the crisis, WASH can be an equalizer, helping to ensure the recovery benefits to all people, not just the lucky few. Finance ministers can lead this shift by working with sector ministers to develop financial policies that support lasting solutions for water, sanitation, and hygiene, policies that maximize value from existing public funding, that mobilize additional funding to fill chronic gaps for water and sanitation, and that gather more partners around our work, including the private sector. So during today's meeting, let's work together to develop and deploy investments and solutions to ensure safe drinking water, sanitation, and hand washing. A smart and necessary investment toward a better, brighter, healthier future for every child and for all of us.
After these inspiring words, I would like, by the Executive Director of UNICEF, I would like to welcome Karin Hulshoff, who is the Regional Director of UNICEF in East Asia and the Pacific Regional Office. Karin, over to you. Karin, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you select English so that you are translated into the other languages? Sorry to have interrupted you.
Should be fine.
Thank you so much. Perfect.
It's an honor to be among this group of distinguished ministers and partner agencies. I would like to remind us of several urgent challenges. First, water scarcity threatens more and more countries every year. We need solutions that make every drop count. Second, millions of people across the region lack access to sanitation. Sanitation is a public good and requires public funds. Third, while the importance of hand washing for disease prevention has received greater attention, we must now sustain the gains beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. Lastly, too many schools and healthcare facilities lack WASH, threatening the health of children and of any who seek healthcare. The cost of providing basic WASH services is a fraction of the human cost and economic cost resulting from poor WASH. The COVID pandemic has reminded the world that WASH is one of the most effective measures to beat any and all viral bacterial diseases, including COVID. We call to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goal, vision for water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities in all health and education centers, where there is also a strong opportunity to promote menstrual health. Solutions should include young people, entrepreneurs, and innovators. Our teams throughout the Asia-Pacific region and around the world are here to support you, and we will work in partnership with the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, World Health Organization, and all of you on this call and many more. In closing, UNICEF reaffirms its commitment to support governments across Asia and the Pacific to achieve universal access to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene, and leave no one behind. And we call on Ministers of Finance and all partners present to come together to fulfill this vision for this generation and for all of those to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen, for your words. And it's now my great pleasure and honor to pass on the floor to Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus for the third time within 1 month. We are very pleased and honored to have him with us again at the third regional meeting. We see it as a sign of encouragement for the work that all of us are doing in the sector, but also a sign of the commitment of WHO to water, sanitation and hygiene as an underlying determinant of health. Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, as you all know, is the WHO Director General since 2017. Previously, he served as Ethiopia's Minister for Foreign Affairs and also as Minister of Health of his country. In 2016, he hosted many of us in Addis Ababa for an SWA Sector Ministers meeting. Dr. Tedros, a pleasure to give you again the floor. You will make the case for water, sanitation and hygiene to protect our health. Dr. Tedros, over to you.
Obrigado, Catarina.
Obrigada.
Obrigado, Madam Chair. You must be tired of me, but very nice to see you.
Not tired at all.
Okay.
Inspired.
Thank you. Excellencies, ministers, and Excellency, my good friend, former Prime Minister of Australia, Kevin Rudd, dear colleagues and friends. It's such a great honor to join you today. These discussions between health, water, and finance ministers are among the most important meetings of the year. Investing in water, sanitation, and hygiene is critical both to preventing and recovering from pandemics and local outbreaks. Its absence leaves all of us exposed. The health of millions of people in Asia and the Pacific is at risk simply because they cannot wash their hands. That includes health workers in 1 out of 3 healthcare facilities globally. You already know the basics. Water, sanitation, and hygiene is a first line of defense against COVID-19 and many other diseases such as diarrhea, cholera, typhoid, influenza, pneumonia, etc. It's also critical for preventing the spread of antimicrobial resistance, which is one of our biggest global threats. Without water, sanitation, and hygiene, we're all vulnerable. This fundamental science has been known for decades. Nonetheless, inequalities in coverage of water, sanitation, and hygiene have persisted. Underinvestment in water, sanitation, and hygiene has left 1.2 billion people in Asia and the Pacific without safe drinking water and 2.5 billion without safe sanitation. 1.5 billion people in the region do not have the means to wash their hands at home. There is also particular concern about providing safe drinking water and sanitation to the 20 million people living in small island developing states who are among the most vulnerable populations in the region to climate change. Globally, we're alarmingly off track to deliver on our commitment to Sustainable Development Goal 6 for water and sanitation. To achieve the 2030 goals, the rate of progress for sanitation needs to quadruple. The 19th of November was World Toilet Day, when WHO and UNICEF launched the State of Sanitation report, which sets out a path for investment in governance, financing, capacity development, data, and innovation. Investments in water, sanitation, and hygiene are what we call a no-regrets investment, which pays a rich dividend in health, human rights, and inclusive economic growth. The economic benefits of investing in sanitation are estimated at about 5 times the cost. And improving hand hygiene can generate savings in health expenditure up to 15 times the cost. In other words, investing in water, sanitation, and hygiene is not just a health imperative, it's an economic imperative. The COVID-19 pandemic is reminding us that health and economics are deeply intertwined, and that investments in health, including water, sanitation, and hygiene, are the necessary foundation for productive, resilient, and stable economies. But these links are not well understood. Too often, health spending is seen as a cost, not an investment. To address this gap, I recently announced that WHO will establish a new council on the economics of health for all, to focus on the links between health and sustainable, inclusive, and innovation-led economic growth. The council will be chaired by the distinguished professor of economics, Professor Mariana Mazzucato. Excellencies, colleagues, and friends, COVID-19 pandemic is the greatest crisis of our time, but it's also the greatest opportunity of our time, an opportunity to rethink the future. Investments in water, sanitation, and hygiene are central policy prescriptions in WHO's manifesto for a healthy and green recovery from COVID-19. With sustainable public investment, responsible management, and accountability, we can make safe water, sanitation, and hygiene a reality for everybody in Asia and the Pacific and around the world. Again, Katarina, Madam Chair, I thank you. Obrigado. And I'm really proud of your leadership. Thank you so much for your commitment and leadership to this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tedros, Mr. Director General, for your inspiring words. For having referred to finance ministers that WASH is a no regrets investment, that it is an economic imperative, that without water there is no health, and that without health there is no economic recovery. And for mentioning that this is the moment to rethink the future and to act. Thank you so much again for your time and for your inspiring words. I would like now to introduce Dr. Bambang Susantono, who is the Vice President of the Asian Development Bank and who is co-convening this meeting with us. Dr. Susantono, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Katarina. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Asian Development Bank, it is my honor and privilege to join all of you in this virtual meeting on the critical issues of investing more in water, sanitation, and hygiene for all. I would like to thank all the eminent speakers, finance ministers, line ministers, and high-ranking officials for joining this important meeting. It shows your leadership and underscore our collective commitment to accelerate investment toward achieving Sustainable Development Goal number 6. In the process, we will also help Asia and the Pacific region combat the COVID-19 pandemics and support the recovery from its devastating health and economic impacts. ADB is committed to be part of this process and partnership. We know that every dollar invested in water and sanitation results in a 4-fold return. Together with reduced healthcare costs and greater productivity in the workplace, water and sanitation investment bring long-term returns to individual households and the wider economy. It also helps reduce inequality and empower women. There are solutions and practical models to follow. India has shown us that strong political leadership and public finance are key factors in successfully delivering safe sanitation services on a massive scale over a short period of time. Between 2014 and 2019, the government built around 110 million toilets, and basic sanitation coverage jumped from 39% to 93%. This is indeed impressive and shows that what can be achieved. Many other governments in the regions are showing tremendous resolve and leadership in this area as well. ADB took swift actions to support our members' response to COVID-19 through finance, knowledge, and partnership. We established a $20 billion package early this year to help our members address their immediate pandemic need. This year and in 2021, we will invest over $3.4 billion in water supply, sanitation, and wastewater treatment, with $1.5 billion targeting sanitation alone. We immediately established a multi-sectoral water and health advisory team across ADB to expand our water, sanitation, and hygiene, or WASH, and health intervention. And to address COVID-19 through this investment, we are also responding with numerous new integrated WASH and health-related technical assistance, loan, and strategic alliance. This will not only address the pandemic, but will serve our long-term aims for the water programs to focus more on water-related diseases, health, and livelihood. The program will be using an inclusive approach targeting vulnerable groups. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, ADB remains committed to providing universal access to wash to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic and build resilience against future pandemic. These are investments for the future of our people. I look forward to hearing the example of best practices and guidance today with the opportunity to listen and to learn from one another. I wish you all a productive event. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Susantono, for your intervention, for already mentioning good practices of what can be achieved when there is political commitment, but also budgetary commitment to water, sanitation, and hygiene, demonstrating that when there is a will, there is indeed a way. Thank you also for outlining the support that the ADB is giving to the sector, but also the extraordinary support and actions in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's now my great pleasure to pass the floor to SWA's high-level chair. And this is the Honourable Kevin Rudd, who is a former Australian Prime Minister and who has been our high-level chair since 2015. It has been a privilege and an inspiration to have him as a chair with SWA and to have his support, his guidance and his energy devoted to water, sanitation and hygiene. He has been passionate since he joined about the topics of finance for WASH. So it's my great pleasure to hand over the floor to him to give us the global political context and to make the social, political and economic case for investing in water, sanitation and hygiene now. Dear Kevin, the floor is yours.
Obrigado, Catarina, and our human dynamo who leads SWA. Kevin, it's good to be with you. Sorry. Good to see you, Tedros. You're looking healthy, and I understand you've been busy. You've had a few jobs to do recently. Thank you for taking time to be with us. And thank you for your personal and professional commitment to the work of the WHO. To Karen and all of our friends at UNICEF, thank you so much for your work. To Susantono, Bapak, thank you so much for your work and the cooperation of the ADB. Asian Development Bank is a huge partner in what we try to do with financing WASH projects around our region. As is the World Bank, and our friends from the World Bank, I'd like to thank them as well. And to you, my colleagues who are finance ministers from across our wider region in Asia and the Pacific, thank you for spending time with us today. We're joined on our list by foreign ministers from the Maldives, please wave, from Pakistan, from Sri Lanka, from Vietnam, from Bangladesh, from Indonesia, from Fiji, from Nepal, from India, from Cambodia, from Laos and Bhutan, and from other countries who have confirmed their participation more recently. But thank you for spending time with us in this important gathering. My job is very simple, and that is to convince all of you why it's good to invest in water and sanitation and hygiene, and why it's good not just economically, but why it's also good politically in each of the countries that we come from. The bottom line is the economics of investing in WASH is plain for all of us. You're responsible ministers, finance ministers, some sector ministers, and you're responsible for making important decisions on the allocation of scarce public finance within your countries. But the reality with investing in water and sanitation projects is the return on investment in jobs created, in health for your communities, and in overall development for your countries is at the very top of the investments that you could possibly make in terms of the return on that investment. And the reverse logic applies as well. The The losses associated with inadequate water and sanitation services currently total some $260 billion per year around the world, or 1.5% of global GDP. Imagine if our global economy was 1.5% bigger in the years to come than it would otherwise be, because we have taken seriously our investments in water and sanitation and in hygiene. So therefore, the economic case, the employment case is clear for all. Today, therefore, I'd like to make 3 simple points to all of you gathered today as ministers. Number 1 is your response to the COVID-19 crisis is an opportunity to invest in water, sanitation, and hygiene in a way that will both control the spread of the virus and rebuild your economies at the same time. Let me look, for example, at the example of our friends from India. Look at the impact of the Swachh Bharat mission to eliminate open defecation. This project itself has created a total of 7.6 million full-time jobs from a total $12.7 billion investment. In other words, 600 jobs for every $1 million invested. This has been transformational in India, and I'd commend our colleagues joining us from Delhi today. My second message is this. In doing so, you help not just your economies over the long term, but you also maximize the value from existing public funds. These investments produce a great return on the deployment of public capital. My third message is you should also use this as a moment to revitalize your approach through identifying areas for innovation and new opportunities for funding. For example, we at SWA, Sanitation and Water for All, we have spent a lot of time developing a new practical handbook. It's called the Finance Minister's Handbook. And Katerina will, I'm sure, provide each and every one of you with your own personal copy. We spent a year or so working on this production. It's to provide each and every one of you with a clear and concise reference book on how you can finance water and sanitation projects. You see, there are many, many alternative sources of finance. Some, of course, draw on general government revenue. Others draw on the productive application of specific tariffs. Others use blended funding with the local community sector. Others use blended funding from the local private sector. Larger private projects may involve investment by the international private sector and private financial institutions. And then you have funding from the traditional development banks, the ADB, and from the World Bank and from other such institutions domestically. What we've sought to do with the Finance Minister's Handbook is to provide you and your heads of government and your sector ministers with a very simple reference text which points to how individual projects can be financed. Because unless we finance them, they won't happen. I'd also draw attention to the work of the Green Climate Fund. And thank you for joining us today, our friends from that fund, and the excellent work that you are doing, and particularly with the impact of social impact bonds. In Kiribati and the Marshall Islands in the Pacific, these have been key. Groundbreaking water projects across their vast outer islands have been able to finally come to fruition thanks to the Green Climate Fund funding. So we thank our friends from that fund. To conclude, let me simply make this point. The economic case for investing in water and sanitation projects is simply there in the facts and in the figures and in the case studies. Secondly, there are creative ways to finance these projects, as demonstrated through SWA's Finance Minister's Handbook. But my final message to each and every one of you as colleagues and friends from across our wider region is this. It also makes good political common sense in your various countries. If you deliver effective water and sanitation projects, guess what? Local people and local communities see a practical return for the investments that have been made. And therefore, when it comes to them deciding on the future of the governments that they have leading them, then those communities and those individuals will remember clearly those investments. To conclude, we are so pleased to be able to have this opportunity with each and every one of you to share our experiences today. We've had finance ministers meeting already across Africa, across Latin America, and now Asia and the Pacific. And we look forward, therefore, to our future work with you. Back to you, our dynamic CEO, Katarina de Albuquerque.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for your inspiring words, and also for referring to the handbook that took us 1 year to develop, as you were mentioning. This was your idea, and it was an idea you came up with when we were together in Delhi at the Swachh Bharat, at the Global Sanitation Conference. This handbook was sent to all ministries, to all governments in the region. Many of you acknowledged the receipt of it. If you want more copies, kindly let us know. The handbook is also available online. So I would now like to introduce you to Dr. Oyun Sanjansuran, who is the Director of External Affairs of the Green Climate Fund. Previously, and that's when I met her, when I had the pleasure to meet her, she was the president of the Global Water Partnership. Oyun, it's my great pleasure to hand over to you.
Thanks a lot, Katarina. And a great privilege to be with all of you, Excellencies. Thank you very much, Honorable Kevin Rudd, for giving the global context, but I think it's very important also to give the concrete handbook to finance ministers as well. So greetings from the Green Climate Fund. I have been asked by the conveners to give a succinct overview of the state of the wash sector in the region. And of course, it's not an easy matter, given the huge variety we see across our region. Based on JMP 2017 data for the Asia region, 73% of people use safely managed water services, 44% of people use safely managed sanitation services, and 66% of people have access to basic hygiene facilities. For Oceania, where we have data, we can see that the figures are similar, but with slightly lower access to at least basic water supply, and slightly high access to at least basic sanitation. In other words, Asia Pacific is close to global averages for safely managed sanitation and water services, and slightly ahead for hygiene facilities. But as you know, this means we still have some way to go to reach SDG 6. From JMP data, we can see while 16 countries in our region are on track to meet the water SDGs, in 18, progress is too slow. And actually, there are 7 countries where progress is even negative or backtracked. It is worth highlighting the situation of open defecation. And then we've heard, about the progress in India. In Asia, open defecation is now about the same as the world average at 9% of the population. And given the level of open defecation 20 years ago, in 2001, it was 27%. We have a progress, and actually the reason to celebrate to a certain degree. However, there were nearly still 440 million people without even basic sanitation in 2017. In Oceania, the level has remained relatively stable, and that is around 3.5%. Of course, these averages hide the variations across and within the countries, with some geographies doing much better than others are doing worse. Of course, variations, in other dimensions between rich and poor consumers, urban and rural areas, female and male. But most of us here today understand the scale of the challenges we face. We know that many of the underlying causes, whether the result of rapid urbanization, weak sector governance, climate change impacts, limited human capacity, or our topic for today, insufficient investment. We also know that COVID has only further amplified these challenges and put WASH in the front line of the fight against the virus. Countries are actually facing double and even triple burden, and we can see it with many countries that we work here at the Green Climate Fund. Health crisis, of course, imminent and obvious, economic and social, and of course, exacerbated by financial problems. And climate change is, of course, a major burden as well. Some governments have had to introduce free water or payment holidays on water bills to ensure that people are not cut off from life-saving water provision and can actually practice hand washing.
Yeah.
Of course, this has put further financial stresses on already overstretched resources. It is clear that access to adequate funding and finance is central to achieving SDGs, which is target of universal access. In the Asia region, the annual investment required to meet SDG 6 has been estimated to be at $51 billion, which is actually above historic investment levels. A small sample, as part of the global GLASS, global analysis and assessment of sanitation and drinking water survey, which was from 2018-2019, indicated that the finance gap is about 39% for urban water supply and about 78% for rural water supply. This biggest gap in dollar terms was urban sanitation. In particular, the increasing need for investment to generate green and climate resilient recovery in the era of COVID and beyond is very much includes the need for investment in WASH and especially in climate resilient WASH sector. And GCF is really trying to also contribute to investment with financing in WASH as well, and climate resilient WASH. We've so far have a portfolio of almost $23 billion projects, $7 billion coming from GCF and the rest 16 from the co-financiers, whether it's public, private, but also local government sector. And I think financiers understand that we need nothing short of realignment of the global financial system to build back better from COVID-19. We'll know that it's not only the public sector. We need everybody across the governments, boardrooms, local communities to remove financing and entrepreneurial barriers to green sustainable investment. I would like to rephrase here Mark Carney's call for financial decision makers, and it was in the COP26 context, but in our context, we must ensure that every single financial decision takes the sustainable development into account, but also SDG 6 water WASH also into account. I would like also to finish my remarks with that it's not only the investment, it's actually policy, institutional, technical barriers that has to be also removed as well, especially in developing countries. In summary, there is a progress, but much more needs to be done to achieve universal access to water and sanitation. I'll hand over back to the moderator and very much looking forward to hearing from the countries and with the concrete results, achievements, and solutions as well. Thank you very much, Katarina.
Thank you so much, Oyun, for setting the regional context and obviously for making the connections with the topic of climate action. Let me already share with you that SWA is convening a sector ministers meeting for next year, and we are very seriously considering devoting it to the topics of water, sanitation and hygiene and climate action. So I guess that we might be working together intensively in the months to come. Thank you so much for having set the regional scene, Oyun. And now I am really delighted to introduce a young old friend, Ms. Jyoti Shukla. Ms. Shukla was the director of the Water Global Practice at the World Bank. And we were just recalling those moments. We were together in Addis Ababa at our sector ministers meeting. Then she hosted our last finance ministers meeting. So thanks to her for all her support in the past, and also thanks to her for being with us here today. Ms. Shukla is now the director at the Singapore Infrastructure and Urban Hub of the World Bank. She will moderate now the next part of the meeting. Jyoti, over to you.
Thank you, Katerina. Really great to see everybody, and a real pleasure for me to be in this session with such eminent and committed champions of the WASH agenda, both from the international community, but in particular, the large number of ministers that we have with us here today, especially the ministers of finance, whose support is going to be critical for the sector to achieve its goals. So as has already been highlighted, meeting the SDG, especially on the WASH side, will require action by a number of key WASH stakeholders. And Oyun talked about the fact that reforms must continue in the sector as we continue to address the issues of weak sector governance in some cases, underperformance by service providers, and limited cost recovery, all of which, many of these factors often undermine the sector's creditworthiness and hence its ability to access market-based finance and expand its financing options, even as it is very clear that now more than ever, more investment in the sector is critical. So in this context, we are particularly honored to have with us 5 esteemed ministers of finance in this session today, and they have agreed to share with us their insights on these issues based on their rich experience. So without further ado, let me introduce our 5 ministers, the Honorable Vishnu Prasad Paudel, Finance Minister from Nepal, the Honorable Ayaz Sayed Qayyum, Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications from Fiji, the Honorable Swahasil Nazara, Vice Minister of Finance from Indonesia, the Honorable Ismail Ali Manik, Minister of State of Finance from the Maldives, and the Honorable Ajit Nevad Cabral, State Minister of Money, Capital Markets, and State Enterprise Reforms from Sri Lanka. Each minister represents a country where concrete steps have been taken to address the investment gap, whether by expanding budgets, mobilizing new sources of funding and financing, or providing incentives towards greater efficiency in the use of existing funds. Each country demonstrates a different but complementary set of actions. So in the interest of time, for each minister, I will provide a very brief summary of their initiative that their country has taken, and will then ask the minister to share their insights on, if you may, the story behind the headline and the prognosis for replication or scale up. And we hope we will have some time for a virtual Q&A. As Katerina mentioned, this is a 120-minute meeting, so we will continue to be as crisp as we possibly can. So let me first start with Nepal. By and large, we will follow the alphabetical order, but the Honorable Minister from Nepal has been called away for a cabinet meeting. So let me start with Nepal with your consideration. In the case of Nepal, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the importance of safe and reliable drinking water and sanitation services, the government of Nepal increased the sector budget in this year by 25%. But more importantly, this was complemented by significant domestic household financing through active participation of consumers in decision-making. So if I may ask, and the question is addressed to the Honorable Minister Vishnu Prasad Paudel to address this latter point of household contributions in the range of 30 to 50% of the capital investment for expansion of urban water supply services. Honorable Minister, I understand that almost $800 million of household financing was mobilized for the construction of toilets in the course of making Nepal open defecation free. I think a lot of participants in this meeting would be very interested in your views on this model that was developed and how you think it could be replicated going forward. So over to you, Minister, and I understand the Minister will be speaking in Nepali with English translation. Over to you.
Thank you heartily for this important question. Honorable ministers, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. Nepal has been practicing water resource conservation, well and pool construction, irrigation canal construction, and other similar social works through public participation at community level since ancient times. Particularly, the Open Defecation Free Declaration campaign progressed as a social movement. Successful implementation of the directive principles determined by the Sanitation Master Plan is the main foundation of this achievement. The reason behind The reason behind spontaneous volunteer contribution from the household level for making toilets was the zero grant policy. Additionally, the initiatives of the local governments, institutional structure from the center to the local levels, allocation of the responsibilities among the stakeholders, intensive capacity building and awareness programs, participation of local communities in decision-making process, and control and ownership of the local communities were some of the supporting reasons. I will now address the second aspect of the question you asked. Yes, this model of household investment is continuously progressing, and I'm confident that it will expand further in the future. For instance, the consumers have increased sense of ownership. Usually, the consumers have been contributing 10 to 20% by public labor contribution in the rural areas. And the consumers have increased sense of ownership towards urban drinking water project. Additionally, the project has been successfully providing service by bearing entire operation cost by itself. And in the coming days, this model will be replicated in wastewater management projects also. The ongoing 15th Periodic Development Plan of Nepal has set a target of providing basic water facility to 99% of the population and high and medium quality water facility to 40% of the population, and treat 20% of the wastewater effluents within the next 3 fiscal years. Likewise, under the Sustainable Development Goals, by 2030 AD, the goal is to reach 90% of the population with high and medium quality water facility and give continuity to the open defecation free situation, and even strengthen it further and treat 50% of the wastewater effluents. For drinking water, it is estimated that Nepal needs to spend about approximately US dollars 8.5 billion to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in the sector of water, sanitation, and hygiene. The government has increased the rate. The government has increased the budget in its budget, but still we need foreign assistance, although internal resource has been increased. For instance, in the rural areas, user groups have been investing 10 to 20% of the cost estimate, including 1% in cash investment. And in the urban areas, 50% in the past and 30% now, people are investing in terms of. Moreover, consumers have been bearing the entire cost of maintenance and the operation of successful service delivery.
May I? Thank you, Minister. That was very succinct but very illustrative and really highlighting the importance of community ownership and participation and very tangible progress and towards the achievement of goals. So many thanks for that intervention. And if I may, then we will move on to Fiji. And in this case, Fiji is a slightly different context, but also faces significant climate change risks. Over half of Fiji's population is urban and continues to grow. And this urban infrastructure is particularly vulnerable to extreme droughts and floodings, as well as sea level rise. So in response to these threats, the government has made significant investments in building and renovating infrastructure in Fiji. And my question to the Honorable Minister Ayaz Syed Qayyum is somewhat different in its character. We heard from the Green Climate Fund earlier in this session. And the GCF has a large portfolio of over $5 billion, but the water and sanitation sector has been very underrepresented in that, in less than just about 6% of that portfolio. But your country, Fiji, has successfully secured a Green Climate Fund grant of more than $30 million to improve climate resilience to water and sanitation services. And this, for the water and sanitation sector, is a new source of multilateral finance. So, Minister, our question to you would be what advice you would share with your fellow finance ministers about accessing such grants from funds such as the Green Climate Fund to increase the overall source of financing in the wash sector, and what opportunities you may see? Over to you, Minister.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity, and also recognition of all the other speakers prior to us. I mean, I think some fundamental issues. One of them, of course, is that you need to have a long-term strategic plan. I think Fiji for a number of decades was in fact mired in not having long-term strategic plan. They were sort of case-by-case, short-term projects. I think that's critically important to ensure that we have a long-term strategic plan, which we have the what we call the Fiji Urban Water Supply and Water and Waste Management Plan we had. The other thing, or aspect, of course, is your objectives. In our case, of course, we have three key objectives. One of them is obviously increasing accessibility to reticulated water systems. The other one is for increasing, or catering for the movement of the population, as you just very, aptly highlighted, that there is a rural-urban drift. So you do have, for example, squatter areas being developed, the greater urban population, to be able to cater for that, in particular when it comes to waste management. And thirdly, obviously, is to adapting our infrastructure to climate changes, of course. The climate crisis is very, very, important to us in respect of being able to cater for that. So in our part of the world, development finance actually equals to climate finance. There is no distinction per se as far as we are concerned. So in this particular example that you've just used, we were able to, given those principles, we were able to get the Green Climate Fund to be able to have a blended finance approach for this particular project. It's about $255 million US dollar funded project, of which we have the Asian Development Bank, about 42 million, the European Investment Bank, about 26 million, and the Green Climate Fund, like you highlighted, about $31 million. So that blend, and the rest, of course, is paid for by the Fijian government through the Fijian taxpayers and the raising of funds through various loans through multi-development financial institutions. So I think that is critically important to understand, that we need to build in climate vulnerability or your resilience into infrastructure. We all know the benefits about accessibility to water. Of course, it gives economic opportunities. Lands can get developed. Businesses, industries go in that area. But I think if you actually build resilience in infrastructure, your ability to bounce back after a climatic event means you get onto the economic activity bandwagon. Every time you have a cyclone and you don't have resilience built into infrastructure, then it takes weeks, sometimes months, to actually bounce back. And I think that is critically important regarding that. I think, just to contextualize it, we had a cyclone in 2016 where 1/3 of the value of our GDP was wiped off in 36 hours. We've since then had, about 8 more cyclones. So you can understand the magnitude of, the funding that's required. So, I think from a finance perspective, your World Banks, your ADBs, and your various other institutions, we need to be able to understand that climate finance is critically important, and also the cost of that finance is critically important to be a lot more sharpened, because countries like Fiji and many other countries that are the cold face of climate change, and now, of course, impacted upon by COVID-19, essentially financially we've been eviscerated, because the tourism sector has essentially died out. And when you have 40% of your GDP relying directly or indirectly based on tourism, your accessibility to finance, and indeed affordable finance, is a challenge. And that would affect your ability to invest in WASH, as much as it is a priority. So I think that is critically important to understand. I'll perhaps end there so we get more questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. I think that was very clear, and I thank you for highlighting the importance of long-term strategic planning, and also for noting that development planning has become virtually synonymous with incorporating climate change and resilience aspects into infrastructure, which are important issues. And we look forward to more participation by countries in accessing GCF funds as a new source of finance for the WASH sector. Thank you so much for your intervention. And moving right along, if I may move on to Indonesia. And for Indonesia, the government's plans to provide wash services for all by 2024, not so far from now. And to this end, the government has introduced a number of innovative financing schemes to encourage local governments and service providers to reduce non-revenue water and increase energy efficiency while expanding services. And these schemes, known as HIBA and NUVAS, have included not just technical assistance, but also the use of output-based financing and the provision of matching grants when market finance has been mobilized. So if I may then turn to the Honorable Suhasil Nazara, Minister from Indonesia. And Minister, our question to you is based on these new incentive-based financing schemes, which Indonesia has been using, to ask you perhaps to share your insights and to see, and based on the track record and experience that Indonesia now has, what recommendations or experiences you would want to share with your fellow finance ministers in using such incentive-based schemes to improve the efficiency in the sector and mobilize more finance. Minister, over to you.
Thank you, Jyoti, honorable ministers, and also fellows from the colleagues from SWA and also from the multilaterals. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation this afternoon, Jakarta time. Before I share my view about the actual project and activities that involves the regions, I think it is. I would like to share with you that it is indeed that Indonesia every 5 years we put what we call the medium-term development plan. Right now we are running the 2020-2024 medium-term development plan. It is a plan. And obviously, when something like COVID comes into the picture, the plans has to we have to review the plan again. But it's okay, because when we have the medium-term plans, it is very important to put the medium-term perspectives in all of our short-term reactions to act to situation like what we have now. In our medium-term development plan, we put the zero defecation target by before 2024, access to sanitation for household, access to drinkable water, and other quantifiable numbers of the indicators. We are on the way there. For example, right now, about 85% of Indonesians have proper and safe access to sanitation. About 90% of Indonesians right now have proper drinkable water and piped water combined, and all of those indicators. So we are keeping track on that, on those indicators, and it is very important that whenever we do the annual budget planning, those perspective keeps telling us something about the more activities that we have to put in place. Now, all of a sudden we have the COVID-19 starting early of this year. And it is very easy actually to say that, we have to put all of our resources to one sector, and then it's very tempting to reallocate in a way that very sector-minded. It is actually, I can share with you as the Vice Minister of Finance together with my minister, we are facing a very tough challenges, very tough choices when the COVID strike. Now, when we look at the water, sanitation, and hygiene activities, very quickly we realized in the very beginning of this year that despite COVID, the WAS projects, WAS activities can become one of the game changer in the COVID-19, our COVID-19 reactions. Number one, it is typically a labor-intensive program. So it is very important that when the business sector start to come down, when the economy start to contract, the economy of the people by way of the working at the rural infrastructure, including WASH activity, WASH project, continue. Because it is a source of labor income. It is usually labor intensive. When we do it with a very strict health protocol, it should be okay. It should provide income to the people. So that is number one. Number two, for a number of years, our budget have already used some of the WASH project and activities as the underlying of our sukuk issuance. So it is very important that the sukuk issuance, and then one time for already 2 years we issue green sukuk issuance, which is very climate change sensitive. We use our WASH activities, WASH project as the underlying. It is very important, therefore, to continue with this project and activities, because it is something that our investors is looking at, and we try to connect them to what we do, helping the people, building the WASH project, but at the same time making the best use of it as the underlying of our development financing. Now, regarding the project that you asked, Jyoti, earlier, NUWAS, National Urban Water and Sanitation. It is a project that is quite successful. It has been 2 years, but I can tell you that the earlier route of this project was actually the rural community-driven development program in Indonesia. And NUW, it's called NUAS in Indonesian, we call it NUAS, NUWAS. It is actually the extension to the urban area. Earlier, for many years, the rural area has already received it. So it is something that we learn from rural areas and then expand to urban. And of course, this has been in several, I think 15, 20 provinces in Indonesia. It combined the technical assistance, also the money for the local water supply company. It has been successful. We are very proud of that, and we would like to expand it further. So the money, together with the money directly from the budget and the money from the project and the money that we transfer to the local region, because Indonesia is very big country, local government play very important role. Combined, that is the source of the WASH, many of the WASH project and activities in the region. So I think I will stop here. I think the bottom line is that COVID-19 should not stop us from looking very carefully and prioritizing the WASH project and activities. It is actually a way to promote WASH, because it is very important to our medium-term development planning. Thank you, Jyoti.
Thank you, Minister, and appreciate also your highlighting the green bond and the base that WASH services provide to it, as well as I'm sure participants would be interested in exploring further the NUWAS project. And with this in mind, maybe allow me to move on, and we will move on to the Maldives. And Maldives also is a country that relies heavily on tourism, as some of our other countries. The Honorable Minister from Fiji talked about it. And if I may call on the Honorable Minister Ismail El Malik, Maldives, in terms of Maldives' reliance on tourism and how it has been impacted by COVID, we would really appreciate hearing from you how your country has prioritized the WASH sector, given its particular strategic importance to the country. So, Minister, if I may turn over to you.
Thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be very brief. I'll also request, since our Environment Minister is also joining, to allow the Minister to make a comment. So the target for the new administration has been to establish water and sanitation facilities in all the inhabited islands by 2023. Since the start of this administration, major progress has been made in achieving this goal. Our Environment Ministry estimates that by the end of 2019, the population with access to piped water and sewerage has reached 68 and 79% respectively. The proposed 2021 budget aims to build on this progress. The new budget, the planned budget aims to initiate water and sanitation projects in all the remaining islands where water and sanitation facilities have not been established and does not have ongoing projects. In 2021, the planned budget, water and sanitation will be ongoing on a total of 169 out of the 188 uninhabited islands. And we expect to spend about 1.2 billion Maldivian rupiah on water and sanitation projects. This is about 14% of the proposed budget for the public sector investment program. So the last year, which has been about single digits.
I may ask everyone to mute if there is an interruption, please.
And at this point, I would like to request the chair to allow our Environment Minister to comment, Dr. Hussain Rashid.
If I may, Minister, if you wouldn't mind, we do have a later session for other ministers to comment in this particular session. We appreciate very much your comments, and maybe we can come to sector ministers in a later.
Let me just briefly comment on the tourism.
Okay.
Our resort sector, they have their own facilities in terms of water and sanitation. So in terms of the budget, what I mentioned, it's to the inhabited islands. So just to reiterate, this year the planned proportion is 14%, and that is for 2021. So we have in fact increased the last 2 years. Average has been about in single digits. So even with the COVID, we have managed to significantly increase the water and sanitation share in the public sector investment program. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And I think the issue of increasing budgets to the wash sector, especially in these particular times, is an important one. And that actually is a natural segue to my final question for this segment of the session. And that is to the Honorable Minister Ajit Cabral from Sri Lanka. Minister, I understand the government of Sri Lanka has, of course, first of all, it has, in line with the UN declaration, recognized access to safe and adequate drinking water and improved sanitation for water as a human right. But impressively, your government has also increased the budget allocation significantly from 75 billion rupiah last year to 200 billion, which is almost a threefold increase given in the current environment. So we would really appreciate hearing from you your insights as to how such a large increase came about, and the impact it is going to have on the economy, including on the employment issues during this current period. So, Minister Cabral, if I could turn over to you, please.
Thank you very much. If I may just tell you, the main reason for that is that we have made it a priority. The most important element in budget making is to recognize what your priorities are. And different countries at different times of their history have different priorities. So at this particular moment of time, we recognize that Sri Lanka has a overall 53% coverage as far as water on tap is concerned for the entire population. So only 53% of the people have it. And then the President and the Prime Minister was of the view that we should work towards bringing that up to at least 95%. So in order to do that, we recognize that in the next 5 years, we may need to allocate at least $1 billion, at least a trillion rupees in the 5 years in order to ensure that we will be able to make that a reality. We have had some experience in the past as well, when in 2006, we had about 72% of the people having electricity, we took a conscious decision that we would want to make that 100% in a span of about 10 years. We were able to achieve 99% in about 9 years. And that was a very important experience that we had at that period. So this time round, the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was of the view that we should now use this same model for water. And that's why we have increased the allocation. And there is a large number of projects that are currently being processed as well as currently being implemented for that. And we are very serious in making that transformation. And I think we have actually put our money where our mouth is.
Thank you, Minister. And I think that is one of the questions that have been coming from the audience as to how does one prioritize the funding for WASH, even though there are so many other demands. So we really appreciate your taking that head on. And we are running a little short on time, but I do want to pick up on a couple of questions that are coming through the chat, and I will see and maybe just put it out to all 5 of you to see if anyone wants to come in. One is this issue, the Honorable Minister from Fiji talked about the long-term approach as to what are the incentives from a ministerial point of view to move from a project-based approach to a long-term approach, and added to that, from your point of view, what improvements in the institutional arrangements do we need as sector stakeholders to make the best of the existing finance to SDG 6 and to get the best out of it? So the floor is open to all our 5 ministers, and though I do request if you could be succinct. So anybody who would like to come in first, let me recognize them. Minister Cabral, please.
Yes, I think it's an important part of the entire process to recognize a need, and then you say we want to do it. The second part is to build the capacity in order to be able to do that. Now, in our case, we had to make sure that we have the ministry capable of delivering on that. As you may realize, when you have only 53% of the people having electricity, to have an ambition of making that 100% is a tall order. But in order to do that, you got to have the capacity, because at the end of the day, otherwise we would fall very short. So there was a very senior minister entrusted with the work. Very competent officials were assigned to that ministry. And now the funding has been provided to the ministry. And I think that is where that transformation could really take place. So A, the money, B, the people, and C, the ensuring that all of them put together can deliver on that promise.
Thank you, Minister. The floor is open. Minister from Fiji, please.
I think just building up what the Honourable Minister from Sri Lanka has said is, we need to ensure that the organisation that's going to deliver it has the capacity to. In Fiji's case, for example, it's not a ministry anymore per se. We have a separate standalone statutory body called the Water Authority of Fiji. So that expertise needs to be there, and plus it needs to have sustainability built in. So, for example, many countries shy away from being able to charge the right rates in terms of the water rates, and being able to have a more nuanced approach in terms of what rates do you charge for those who are using it for commercial purposes and those who are using for example, for communal purposes or private use or, other sort of community purposes. That I think is critically important. And the other one is, the Minister highlighted, need to build capacity even within the economy and or seek that capacity and expertise from offshore. So I think outsourcing is critically important, because many countries we've seen, indeed in Fiji's case, everything was sort of being done in-house. So there is a lack of ability to be able to get outsourcing. So in Fiji's case, for example, a number of the large projects we've got, an Australian company doing various things. We've got a French company. And we have, various other companies and expertise that's been built locally too. So I think that is critically important. And of course, your long-term strategy, as we said earlier on, is critically important, so everybody knows what the game plan is. And also, in particular with developing countries, you need to be able to work with your financial institutions, your multilateral financial institutions, So they know exactly where we are going, and it opens up that public-private sector space.
Thank you, Minister Qayyum. The floor is open if another minister would like to come in at this moment. We have Minister from Indonesia, please.
I think I would like to echo my other honorable ministers saying that for the long-term approach, WASH is not something that you can get in a short term of time. It is very important to have a long-term view, and especially in the time like this, where despite the fact that you have a long-term view, all of a sudden COVID-19 came, and then it's easy to say that if you don't have a long-term plan, it is easy to dismiss that one or two sectors. Of course, we understand that it's very important. It happens that WASH is something that we can also use to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19. As I explained earlier, it is labor intensive. It can be a labor intensive program to provide people with the employment and income short term. But it is also very important to keep in mind that in the long term, we will continue our country's development. And for a country like as big as Indonesia, usually the development for each region is different. We have a more modern region like the island of Java, and we have more challenges in the outer island. It is very important, and that is why the long-term view is very important to keep in mind that where we are going and then how resources should finally be allocated. Thank you, Jyoti.
Thank you. And Minister Manik, if I could maybe hand the final word to you before we end this session, if any closing thoughts.
Thank you. As I had previously mentioned, this year we have managed for the planned 2021 budget, we have managed to increase the share of water and sanitation to 14%. So this year the actual was partly due to COVID, it was around 8%. So we continually do these exercises of spending review, and as well as there is participation of the line ministry, the environment ministry, in decisions relating to the sector. So it's not the treasury or the finance minister unilaterally deciding. So the budget process, there is real participation of the line ministry. So that's why we have managed to increase the share of this sector for next year. So in that sense, the process of engagement with the line agency and the sectoral experts has been an important element in the budget process.
So, Your Excellencies, I really want to thank you, I think, for highlighting two additional issues, one on the issue of capacity, but most importantly, the issue of a strong partnership between the sector ministries and your finance ministries as we look to achieve these goals together. So we really welcome your support and your commitment in this regard. And I know there are a lot of questions and comments and lots of stakeholders, and for that unenviable task of taking the conversation forward with a large group of participants that we have here, I hand over back to Katerina, and thank you very much for your time. It has really been a pleasure. So Katerina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jyoti and honorable ministers, and thank you so much for the first session. I think it was amazing to overcome the barriers of distance and time zones and create this really virtual dialogue. I'm truly inspired and happy about what we have collectively achieved. So let me move forward to the next session and invite, as you were saying, Jyoti, other honorable ministers to take the floor. I will start by His Excellency Shri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat, who is the Minister of Child Shakti in India. Sir, we all know, and we heard it already several times today, that India has implemented the world's biggest sanitation program, Swachh Bharat, in which the government made significant public investments. Could you kindly speak to the financing mechanisms that enable the implementation of this huge program, and how you will finance sustainability going forward? Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us.
Finance and sector ministers to discuss the case for investing in water, sanitation, and hygiene. India's experience with Swachh Bharat mission, the Clean India mission, has conclusively proved that the investment in sanitation is not only prudent but a very smart action. The returns are much more than every penny spent. All of us will have to keep in mind while planning and investing that sanitation, hygiene, and water are inseparable. We cannot solve this puzzle in isolation. Dear friends, prior to Swachh Bharat mission, a World Bank study had estimated that inadequate sanitation caused India considerable economic losses. In 2006, these losses were estimated as equivalent to 6.4% of India's GDP, a whooping $53 billion per year. Dear friends, for the first time in the history of independent India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi brought the subject of sanitation before the public and linked it with health, prosperity, and prestige of the people of India, understanding it very well that good sanitation makes good economy. He thought it important to walk the talk on sanitation. He led the largest behavioral change campaign of the world, the biggest people movement in the sanitation in the history of mankind, and communicated to people as how poor sanitation undermines the safety and dignity of women, how it hinders physical and cognitive development and learning abilities of children. He convinced people how vicious cycle is in sanitation adversely affects the productivity of the nation. The government ensured that there is more than adequate public financing for sanitation and water programs. A budget of about $20 billion backed India's Swachh Bharat mission. Almost $6 billion were contributed by private people and other ministries and departments. From 2014 to 2019, as a result, in 5 years, India declared itself as open defecation free, thus achieving Sustainable Development Goal for sanitation to all 11 years before the target year 2030. More than $20 billion have been allocated to the ongoing phase 2 of the Swachh Bharat. About $50 billion have been provided for an equally ambitious water for every household scheme, the Jal Jeevan Mission, with a goal to complete it by 2024. If I add money allocated for river cleaning and other efforts, total investment of India in water and sanitation exceeds $100 billion. An incentive of about $200 provided to every family in building toilet had given remarkable returns. UNICEF's assessment on impacts of Swachh Bharat mission finds that every household is an open defecation-free village saves around $715 per year on medical and other indirect costs. On macroeconomic impacts, UNICEF again found that Swachh Bharat mission led to creation of 7.55 million full-time equivalent jobs in 5 years. Evaluating the sanitation market, Toilet Board Coalition has assessed that due to SBM, India's sanitation industry is set to be worth $62 billion by 2021. There have been remarkable improvement in the lives of rural Indians who estimated that in 5 years, Swachh Bharat Mission saved more than 300,000 lives and more than 14 million disability adjusted life years have been avoided. BMGF and UNICEF studies have confirmed a profound improvement in child health in ODF villages and improvement in quality of groundwater. Women have been at the forefront of this mission. A joint study of UNICEF and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation done by a research group, Sambodhi, in 2020 found that 91% women saved up to 1 hour per day because of having toilet at home, and 81% women felt safer and having a more dignified life. These independent findings from international organizations are loud and clear in announcing the value of every penny spent in sanitation. Dalberg came out with an interesting research that every message of sanitation reached Indian individuals more than 2,500 times, and thus money spent on awareness campaigns too had a return of more than 11 times. Same zeal, same support from all. We all are again going to have in our Water for All for our Jal Jeevan mission. And again, we are confident that the success of India's sanitation and water programs will certainly support India's ambitious economic and social goals. So I thank you, everybody, for participating and giving me a chance to participate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. It was a pleasure to listen to you and an inspiration. And your intervention proves what I was saying earlier this morning, that when there is a will and when there is a big will, there is a way. So congratulations to India for all the achievements. And we are looking forward to counting with your presence at our 2021 Sector Ministers meeting. I think that you can keep inspiring the Sector Ministers of all our global partners and national partners from all the regions on regarding the big improvements that India made in the area of SDG 6. Thank you so much. I'm now passing on the floor to His Excellency Tajul Islam, who is the Minister of Local Government, Rural Development and Cooperatives in Bangladesh. We understand, Your Excellency, that Bangladesh has increased its public investments in the sector. Can you tell us what has Bangladesh done to prioritize financing for WASH? The only time I was in Dhaka, I had the privilege to meet with Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, and I always say that she was the first head of state or government who had a big smile when talking about sanitation. So tell us what have you done to prioritize financing for WASH?
Oh, thank you, Katrina, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, distinguished Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. She is taking the charge of the country, I think, 1 decade before. And from then time, he had declared to scale up the country in the level of the developed country, and for which she has independently segregated all the plans and given the assignments to the respective peoples for the implementation, and financial support have been organized. So at this moment, actually, Bangladesh is a 100% open defecation free country, and 98% we have a water coverage. But now we are working and giving our full effort for the surface water in a state of the groundwater. So we have a long-term actually target, which would be, I think, we can meet within the period of the SDG goal 10 years, that is 2030. Hopefully we are trying to for doing that. So, and within this pandemic situation, actually our national organization public health engineering department and WASA in urban areas, they are fully equipped and they have able to reach the water to the every individuals for the hygiene, hand wash, and for all other the necessary to they have to use. So this was very nice. And nowadays, actually, we have a target to seek the to meet the demand of target of SDG 6.1 and 6.2. For this, our General Economic Division of Bangladesh, they made a study report for which they require 3.4 billion US dollar, and that is per annum it is require 1.31 billion. But actually there is some sort of the mismatch in the budget allocation. In 2017 and 18, the allocation was $8.8 billion, and gap was the $0.51 billion. But in 2019 and 2020 fiscal year, allocation was given 1.26 billion US dollar. It have been raised. If we can increase yearly budget more 250 million US dollar to minimize the gap which already been made. So we can do that. And by this time, the development partners have committed 150 million US dollar to supply to be funded in every annum. But there is still some sort of the gap. But government of Bangladesh is optimistic about the sanitation, and the water facility has to be reached to every individual. And actually, despite the COVID situation, Bangladesh economy is still within the track, and government all the budgetary allocation is distributing according to the normal period. For these kinds of a small gap, from our ministry, being a line ministry, we are advocating to our finance ministry to give the extra budgetary support. In the same time, also we are working with our development partner, with whom Bangladesh have a very good relation, because in context of GDP, our foreign borrowing is much more lower. So they are coming forward to extend their cooperation for financial support to Bangladesh. So I think that will not be a very big challenge. And another big opportunity for Bangladesh is that by this time, we able to connect all the individual houses with the electricity. So as there is electricity, so the peoples are, there is one opportunity to facilitate them the safe water. And by this time, actually, we have an underground water facility program, which is successfully is going ahead and have been implemented. And for the safe water, we have already established many numbers of the testing lab of the several districts. But by this time, we have taken a project to set up a testing lab in every district, so that the testing through the testing they could be confirmed that the quality of the water is giving the same. And about which I have pointed out just before that we are very optimistic to look after about the surface water. So for this region, to coverage the safe surface water, by this time 37 Purshava has been taken in consideration to extend the network and pipeline water supply. And other cities and also remote area is also bringing it in coverage. And also a lot of mega projects have been taken in urban area and also for the rural coverage for safe water supply. So Bangladesh context, I think we are very confident that despite the COVID situation, and we have a lot of experience, we have learned we face a bitter situation. In the same time, we learn a lot of things, how could we can manage. And there is one advantage we have achieved, that the awareness have been developed to the common people. So hand wash and sanitation and environment security in terms of the environment pollution. So all these things is advantage. So I think with the cooperation of our development partners and Bangladesh government is optimistic, is giving the full-hearted effort for scale of the situation to meet the SDG target 6.1 and 6.2. So,
thank you so much. Oh, sorry, Your Excellency. Thank you so much. Thank you. We really appreciate your intervention. I must say, I visited much of the examples that you gave and the extraordinary work that is being done in Bangladesh, not only in the cities, but at rural level. So thank you so much. There are other honorable ministers who want to take the floor. I ask everyone to please be as succinct as possible. We are already running late, and I don't want to extend the meeting for too long. I will invite now the honorable ministers from Vietnam and Nepal, and I would like, besides what I am going to ask, and this is a generic question for all the ministers, for especially the sector ministers in the room, what are the WASH finance issues that keep you awake at night? What is it that worries you? I think that it would be interesting to put that on the table so that we can then have a discussion about it and convey these nightmares to the finance ministers. So it's now my honor to invite His Excellency Nguyen Hoang Hip, who is the Vice Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. Vietnam has had a successful response to COVID-19. Could you tell us how you have prioritized WASH financing to strengthen your response to COVID? And again, please, Honorable Vice Minister, be as short as possible in your answer. Thank you so much.
Càng ngắn gọn càng tốt được không ạ? Xin cảm ơn ngài ạ.
Ms. Katarina, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate the organization of this high-level conference because we learned a lot of lessons from other countries, and a lot of lessons can be applied to our governance activities in Vietnam. Katarina said that many ministers have inspired you, and I said that apart from them inspiring us, you also inspire me a lot in your introduction remarks for Vietnam. I would like to tell you that today we have the representatives from a lot of international organizations in this meeting room. From UNICEF, we have Madame Brana Flowers, country representative of UNICEF. We also have representatives from the Dutch Embassy, World Bank, ADB, and many other international organizations. Due to time limit, I would like to briefly present as follows. So first, in terms of mechanism, in Vietnam, the Ministry of Agriculture is in charge of water in rural areas, whereas the Ministry of Construction is in charge of water supply in urban areas. Currently, we have 35 million populations in urban areas, and 100% of them are using clean water. In rural areas, 65 million people, there are 65 million, and 88% of them get access to clean water. However, in relation to tap water, only 51% of the population get access to tap water in rural areas. That means 49% of rural populations still not access clean tap water. In terms of sanitation, we have made a lot of efforts, and to date, we still have 16 million rural populations, accounting for 25% of the rural population, do not have access to hygienic latrines. There is a big problem And Katarina, you also said that what we often think in our dreams. So we, as people in this area, we always think how to get enough resources and investment so that all Vietnamese citizens can get access to clean water and sanitation facilities. So the funding is always a big problem. And once we have funding, how to spend it is also another headache. I say so because when we have water supply factories, that is not all. We also have areas where we are unable to provide centralized water supply. So in relation to latrines, apart from funding, we also need to overcome the barriers relating to their traditional customs or practices. So sometimes we have funding, but we still cannot do certain things. That's something that we think quite a lot. In my dreams, I always think of these issues. In order to address them, I think there are some activities that have been implemented by that, and we will continue to implement them. First, we need a strategy for WASH. We already have a strategy, and the strategy will be completed in 2020, and then we will develop a new strategy for the next period. And this strategy will be approved by our government. Secondly, we need adequate institutions. We have laws and guiding documents in the WASH area. Recently, our National Assembly has issued a big policy on water security, which emphasizes people's access to water, especially clean one, and to rural sanitation. Next, in relation to funding, in the medium term, we will make more investment in WASH in rural areas. And in all the programs managed by my ministry, as well as in other programs, we have been able to mobilize more than 400 million USD from the state budget. It is not a big amount. However, it is enough for us to implement some important activities. So it is like the seed money. And then we will continue to socialize funding from other sources, because we believe that if this field is attractive enough, the private sector will have interest in making investment. And only when we have the investment from private sector, our strategy can be implemented sustainably. That is an important factor for us in Vietnam. Next, we need to enhance international cooperation and mobilize international funding sources. Today, we have a lot of international organizations here with us, like UNICEF, Dutch Embassy, World Bank, IDB, etc. These are organizations that have been accompanying us for a long time in locating resources to this field. And in the next 5 years, we expect that we will be able to borrow 500 million USD from these organizations to make further investment in WASH. Our government has adopted such direction. Regarding the solutions that we have been doing, we think that in order to do well in WASH, we need international cooperation. So apart from funding from them, experience sharing is also very important. I would like to thank the organizers of this event for organizing this event. And I would like to thank all the other ministers for sharing your experience and lessons learned. We learned quite a lot from you. And I hope that I do not exceed the time given to me. Thank you.
Your Excellency, dear Vice Minister, what a pleasure to listen to you again. I talked about nightmares, you talked about headaches. I hope that we overcome all of this very soon. Again, thanks for having received us last year in Vietnam. Thank you for the meeting at your ministry with you. Thank you also for having hosted our steering committee meeting almost one year ago. Thank you for your leadership, and I truly hope to see you again next year, face to face, at our sector ministers meeting. It's now my great pleasure to hand over to the Honorable Bina Magal, the Minister for Water Supply in Nepal. So at the current rate of investments, Nepal has around 60% of the needed investments. How are you working to close the investment gap, including through conditional and matching grants to the subnational levels and output-based programs? Over to you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Katrina, Madam, for the question. A special thanks. Honorable Ministers, dignitaries. In Nepal, Nepal is trying different models to support WASH investments to meet its SDG and national targets, including repayable and full cost recovery financing, blended financing, annuity models, and particularly for urban areas. Along with that, in these areas, for alternative financing, like performance-based grants to the municipalities, climate financing, mobilization of climate financing, and use of a strong cooperative network existing throughout the country are also explored. In this, I want to talk about some of the financing modalities practiced in Nepal. In Nepal, the household financing is a very important area. Honorable Finance Minister Vishnu Paudel has already said that in the rural areas, the users who are benefited, they also provide appropriate investment. They invest 10 to 20% of the capital investment shared by the household areas. Likewise, the second type of modeling is co-financing model. Under this model, especially in the urban areas, the user household, 30% of the capital investment is being shared by benefiting households. Among this 30%, about 5% of it is being collected as upfront cash from the households, and the remaining 25% is given from the town development fund. The interest rate for this loan is 5%, and the repayment time is 20 years, within which they have to pay the principal and interest. Users committee providers, service providers, they collect tariffs to pay tariff for using the water service and use it to pay back loan and interest, and they also save and use it for maintenance. So this has been a successful model in Nepal. Just a few days ago, the government of Nepal, the federal government, provincial government, and local government, they have prepared a guideline. We have prepared a guideline for co-financing for 3 tiers of government. So that will provide a new opportunity for co-financing in this area. In the context of Nepal, drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene, the participation of private sector also has a possibility of participation, for which we would like to encourage and mobilize deployment for their deployment, and we will try about it further in the coming days. Along with this, international development partners are providing enough support. I would like to thank them, and in the coming days also in the drinking water and sanitation area also, they will provide additional support in the coming days. So I'd like to request, and so in the context of Nepal, for drinking water, drinking water service should be taken as sustainable and effective, and we have taken public participation as an important factor, people's investment, and physical presence of the people and people's responsibility is government's first priority. We have 42,000 to 43,000 users committees across the country, and these user committees, they take the responsibility of the drinking water projects we provide them. That is why for the drinking water, to make it effective to the people, we have to encourage the people to invest and make them responsible and give them. We have handed over the accountability or responsibility, ownership to the people, because of which the government is also saved of hiring more staff, monitoring, supervision, and everything. It has become very easy for us because the people themselves have taken the responsibility. That is why we did face a lot of difficulties. We do have a lot of geographical terrain-wise difficulty, but still we have launched a campaign to provide good quality drinking water, processed water, treated water. That is our campaign. And for that, recently, we have declared our country as an open defecation-free country. And to proceed with the Sustainable Development Goals, the government is aiming to participate and engage the people. With the beginning of the open defecation-free zone, we want to engage the people for drinking water service also. And that is why for drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene, that is in national priority, and allocation of internal resources, and the international financing also has an important role. And I think other countries will also benefit from the experience of our country. So with this saying that, thanking you for providing me the opportunity to speak at this event and for asking important question. I'd like to thank Katrina Madam and end my speech here. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Minister. Thank you so much for your words. And let me note with great pleasure the fact that you are the first woman minister speaking at this meeting. And at SWA, we are really proud of seeing women in positions of power. And I hope that I know this has inspired many others who are following this meeting. Thank you. I will now move and give the floor to some bilateral agencies. Let me remind you that we are really running late, and I ask you all to be please as succinct as possible, because there are many others requesting the floor, and we should end the meeting in 2 minutes. As you can imagine, this will be impossible. So please try to stick to a limited amount of time. It's now my great pleasure to hand over the floor to an old friend, Ambassador Christian Früdiger, who is the Deputy Director General of the Swiss Development Agency. Christian.
Many thanks. Merci beaucoup, Katharina. Great to see you again. Hope we can soon meet in person again. Excellencies, honorable ministers, let me just make 4 quick points. The first one is that I would like to remind all of us that access to water and sanitation are human rights, and that we have all an obligation to progressively realize these rights. Because still, poor households are disproportionately burdened with the expenses related to water, sanitation, and hygiene. The second is the funding. We've talked about the funding difficulties. Public funding and cost recovery are not sufficient. We need to mobilize additional resources. Some of those are very well mentioned in the handbook for finance ministers. Private sector, mobilization of private sector funding. Switzerland has a bit of experience in there. Mobilizing new innovative financial instruments. About 1/3 of microfinance funds are based in Switzerland. But impact financing, blended financing are not easy undertakings. If this was a simple market, we would have made this mainstream long time ago. So a lot more efforts are needed there. Third, transparent data. We can only invest in manage what we can measure. And for that, we need transparent, reliable data. And we really commend the UN Integrated Monitoring Initiative on SDG 6. And then the last point, water and sanitation, particularly if you look at effluents, are transboundary issues. So this requires collaboration between governments and transporter coordination. So this meeting and others will hopefully pave the way for that collaboration as well. And then last but not least, WASH. WASH is an opportunity in this COVID-19 crisis. We all are looking at vaccines, treatments, and diagnostics, but we will not be able to overcome this crisis without water, sanitation, and hygiene in any country. And so let's look at it, beyond the frustrations and nightmares as the opportunity. It's the return of WASH. And if ever you had a case, we have one now. So thanks a lot. Back to you, Katharina.
Thank you so much, Christian. Thank you for ending on a positive note, stopping us to talk about nightmares and headaches and look at all the possibilities that lie ahead of us if we invest in water, sanitation, and hygiene. Thank you so much. It's now my great pleasure to hand over the floor to Mr. Amano Yusuke, who is the Senior Vice President of the Japanese International Cooperation Agency. Amano-san, over to you, please.
Thank you, Katarina-san. It's a great honor to have this valuable opportunity today. I'd like to make 3 comments from JICA shortly. Firstly, I'd like to introduce the current and coming JICA support to fight against COVID-19 pandemic. We are extending emergency assistance to procure chemicals and fuels to maintain water supply in more than 20 countries, and conducting campaign to promote hand washing with water and soap worldwide. JICA plans to double the amount of assistance to health sector, focusing on 4 areas: precaution, treatment, prevention, and universal health coverage. For precaution and treatment, we will build and upgrade hospitals and provide training programs to help countries strengthen their health systems. For prevention, we will increase the support for WASH sector by 20%. Secondly, we would say that it is critical to allocate financial resources to WASH sector to prevent infection. Washing hands with water and soap is a basic preventive measure against COVID-19. However, in some cases, the budget for water supply has been cut due to financial constraints. We reiterate that the benefit of hand washing can be up to 15 times the necessary cost according to OECD's estimate. Thirdly, we should concentrate on building sustainable water utilities. In order to do so, water utilities need to secure tariff revenues and achieve sound financial management. Therefore, investments to increase the tariff revenue by expanding service population and improving people's willingness to pay should be prioritized. Achieving tariff revenue-based management would reduce the financial burden of the government. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, dear Amano-san, for your support and also for your words and for sharing with us the work that JICA is doing in support of the sector. It's now my pleasure and my honor to hand over the floor to Mr. Bertrand Valkener, who is the Associate Chief Executive Officer of the Agence Française de Développement, the French Development Agency. Monsieur, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear Katarina, dear Excellencies, distinguished guests. It's a pleasure for me to be here today because the cause of which we are talking about today is of such great importance that I want to thank the organization of this event and the energy that was put by SWA in order to gather us all together today. We indeed are talking about SDG number 6, but we are also talking about many other SDGs because water, sanitation, and hygiene are involved in the preservation of biodiversity, in the fight against climate change, and in other areas such as fighting against floods, major floods, which is obviously an acute concern for many of the countries that are represented here today. So I want to say that for the French Development Agency, this sector of activity has been a historic sector for us. We've been doubling our commitments to sanitation, water, and hygiene up to 1.3 billion euros in 2019, starting from half of that amount in 2014. And if it represents 10% of our activity, which is a lot for us, it's obviously very small at the scale we are talking about, and given the needs that you've expressed and that many of you have reminded us today. So this is the reason why we organized last November, from the 11th to the 13th of November, a forum, the first of the world, gathering 450 public development banks, because we have the conviction that those actors, the public development banks, can play a major role in aligning finance, public finance and private finance with the SDGs, including SDG number 6, and all those that are concerned with the water and sanitation issues. Those 450 public development banks represent $2.1 trillion of annual investment, which is about 10% of the total worldwide investment. And the goal, the very specific goal of that forum, the first one in the world, was to give the direction towards the alignment of the mandate and of the actions of those 450 public finance institutions, with the view to leverage private finance at the same time. This is something that was said today. Given the financing gap that we see today in the sanitation and water sector, we need 3 components to be there. We need good governance, we need efficiency and expertise, and we need finance, which is the reason why we've put so much emphasis on leveraging public finance on one side and private finance on the other side. So it's a collective action that we want to start with municipalities, with sectorial ministers, with Ministry of Finance, who obviously have the power and ability to give the mandate to public finance institutions to invest in those sectors. And we also need private capitals, we need private-public partnerships, and we need good, sound regulations to make sure that the private investment will be made in that very important sector. So just to conclude on my quick speech, I wanted to ask you, dear colleagues, dear ministers, what's your stance, what's your view as far as public finance institutions are concerned? Do you see a role for them in financing and supporting the development of the water and sanitation sector in your countries? What do you want from those public finance institutions, and how can we better serve the political objectives and political mandate and political agenda that you are putting with such energy as described this morning? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bertrand. Some of what you said, well, thank you for the initiative on financing in common. It was also a pleasure from SWA's side to join the discussions. And thank you for putting again the issue of good governance on the table. Christian had already mentioned human rights, and we also believe these are fundamental pillars if we want SDG 6 to be achieved, realized for everyone on our planet. I still have several ministers who have asked for the floor. I still have representatives from different constituencies who also want to talk, and we ran out of time. So let's move forward. I'm happy now to invite the Honorable Malik Amin Aslam, the Federal Minister and Advisor to the Prime Minister for Climate Change in Pakistan, to take the floor. I have a question for you, Honorable Minister. How have you mobilized finance to implement your water, sanitation and hygiene targets? Let's hope that your line was already identified by my colleagues. We are making sure, trying to make sure that the connection happens. Okay. If this is not the case, we will come back to you later, and I will invite the Honorable Associate Professor Bukong Sihavong, the Minister of Health of the Lao People's Democratic Republic, to kindly answer the following question. given the socio-economic challenges that COVID-19 has presented for your country, what financing approaches will you use to mobilize and consolidate WASH financing and sustain the gains to achieve universal coverage of water, sanitation and hygiene services for all?
Thank you, Katarina. Excellency, Honorable Ministers. I, Dr. Bunfeng Phumalasit, Vice Minister of Health of Lao PDR, would like to thank the SWA Global Partnership for giving us the opportunity to participate in this important meeting. And thank you for your good question. Given the critical progress in WASH development over the past decade, the first step for Lao PDR were to consolidate these gains. To enable this, Lao PDR has placed WASH centrally in many of the government COVID-19 response, including the 9th National Socio-Economic Development Plan and the target to achieve universal health coverage by 2025. We have worked hard with the support of our partners to strengthen WASH facility and practice in schools and health facility to help mitigate the spread of COVID-19, the impact of the climate change and natural disaster, and to provide safer schools for our children and health facility for our people. Given the fiscal constraint arising during and post the pandemics, the disaster, our programs will focus on cost-effective strategy to obtain the greatest gains from the limited fund available. This will include investing in community-led total sanitation, a cost-effective behavior change approach that is achieving growing success in the country, awareness and social norms, a strategy to consolidate the hand washing gains made during the COVID-19 outbreak. Equitable cost recovery mechanism will be explored together with looking to see how the private sector can leverage household investment to rapidly achieve better coverage. In addition, we focus on water safety plan to improve drinking water quality and investment in WASH in school and health facilities to instill good hygiene practice. Before COVID-19, we were broadly on track to achieve universal basic sanitation and water coverage. However, given the socio-economic impacts that Lao PDR face, even with this target strategy, the constraint associated with the COVID-19 will challenge us to achieve universal coverage. We welcome this meeting as an opportunity to obtain innovative ideas and approaches to strengthen existing partnership and possibly to open up new ones. We are proud of what we have achieved, and with further support, we will strive for Lao PDR to achieve access to sanitation and water for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Mr. Vice Minister. I will now move to invite the Honorable Dr. Hussain Rashid Hassan, who is the Minister of Environment from the Maldives. Your Excellency, Honorable Minister, congratulations for the achievement in ratifying the Water and Sanitation Act in the Maldives and for the launch of your 5-year sector strategic plan. How will these two achievements contribute to mobilizing finance for the sector, including through climate finance, which we understand the Maldives has been able to do. Please be as short as possible, Excellency.
From the sunny side of life. The government of Maldives is fully committed to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goal 6, that is water and sanitation for all. For the Maldivians, we will achieve SDG 6 much earlier than the UN target, which is 2030. The government of the President Ibrahim Mohamed Salih is committed to provide access to pipe water supply and pipe sewage services in all the 187 inhabited islands in the Maldives by 2023. So all our tourist resorts already have access to water and sanitation, of course. So we will be achieving SDG 6 7 years ahead of UN target. Provision of water and sanitation for all Maldivians is a key pledge of the government. We will be investing approximately US $320 million by 2023 to provide water and sanitation for all Maldivians in all 187 islands that people are living. We are now in the second year of the 5-year project. Despite the delays caused by the global pandemic and despite being geographically hugely fragmented, at present 68% of our population has access to water supply, and 79% of the population has access to piped sewerage facilities. We know this is a huge task and we have limited resources too. However, we are convinced that investment in WASH are worth and necessary for our health, social development, economic development. And to ensure sustainable development of an effective regulation of the WASH sector, a Water Sewage Act was enacted this year, and which you have mentioned already. This law provides legal framework to regulate the and govern the water and sanitation sector in the country, and this will encourage private investment at the sector too. A utility regulatory authority will be established later this year under a separate act. The act has already been passed by the Parliament, and it will be soon, I believe, ratified by the President. The National Water and Sewerage Strategic Action Plan 2020 to 2025 has been formulated and was widely discussed with the people. This plan will actually enhance the sector by providing development for the water and sanitation sector under the Water and Sewerage Act, of course. And this is an essential part, because if we are to develop water and sanitation in the country, we must have a legal framework. In recognition of the need for trained personnel to run the water and sanitation services nationwide, plans have been drawn to provide training for technical and vocational training and certificate level and education for our people. Right now, we actually are in need of trained people to run this sector. We need to have water engineers, we need to have sewerage engineers, we must have technicians to ensure the water we send to the households in these 187 islands are actually fit to the World Health Organization standards. So these are very important for us. Training is important, and not only the physical infrastructure, but the training is really essential. So we want to invest in that too. Furthermore, with the support of the GCF and the UNDP, we are implementing a $28.2 million project to support the vulnerable communities in the Maldives to manage climate change-induced water shortages. This project is actually in the process of being implemented, and this is a very important project. The project will deliver safe and secure fresh water to 29 islands. Full water systems will be established in 4 northern islands, and rainwater harvesting and water delivery systems will be established in 25 islands in 7 atolls. Our government is fully committed to develop a fully functional water sector in the Maldives. And I really do not want to take much of your time, but if you have any questions, we will be ready to answer. And once again, I would like to thank you for inviting me, and also would like to thank our development partners for financing our wash sector in the Maldives. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. I still have 2 more ministers who asked for the floor. I will hand over to them. I will start with the Honorable Vasudeva Nanayakara, who is the Minister of Water Supply in Sri Lanka. Sir, how does Sri Lanka plan to address some of the anticipated financing challenges in achieving the national target through the Accelerated Water Supply Expansion Program?
Thank you very much, Moderator. Excellencies, eminent persons of the agencies, we are now confronted by the timeline in providing safe drinking water for all in our country. The timeline lies within the next 4 years. We have to achieve these goals. In doing so, our main problems and obstacles that would have been placed in our way would be the finances, but the government being committed to the social welfare programs basically has given us a large portion of the budget in order to carry out these programs effectively, efficiently, and speedily. Now we have to go to the question of the material resources, for which our affiliate of the Water Supply and Drainage Board is to develop an institution to train persons, young people in skills, and to train people in technology, and thus provide the necessary human resources to the project that we have envisaged. And the next difficult thing is to increase the inspiration among the workforce so that they would speedily carry out the jobs that are entrusted to them, and for which we have to have a continuing interaction between all levels of employees in the ministry, in the board, and in the department. We have the community-based water projects where 70% is provided by the government, 30% by the community with their labor. And we go on the basis of the community-based water projects in the difficult areas and terrain. And the Water Supply and Drainage Board in the rest of the areas where we will give clean pipe-borne water to almost every section of our population. Where now the speed in which we can move is going to be the test for our ambitions, and therefore we need to look at the institutional frameworks where we need to have the red tape cut down and we need to have flexibility increased, and where we will give responsibility to all people at all levels. And this, I believe, would give us the necessary speed that we need to catch up with in order to achieve the goals that we have set for ourselves. And may I conclude by saying our great ancient saying is that let not a drop of water go to the sea without being properly used and adequately used. This comes from 1,000 years ago. And we are therefore committed with a passion for social welfare and for the people. And therefore, I don't see that we have any reason to worry that we will fail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. And I'm sure that with your determination, your enthusiasm, you will not fail, you will succeed. Thank you so much for your words. And let me now pass the floor over to our last minister before moving to the different stakeholders. And that's the Honorable John Uzamati, who is the Minister of Infrastructure, Transport, Disaster Management, and Meteorological Services of Fiji. Your Excellency, Honorable Minister, you have the floor. I saw you online. Oh, good. Bula bula.
Very fruitful meeting, listening to the inputs by the ministers for finance. And it's great to see that there's much more appetite for investing in water sanitation and hygiene. And for those of us that are in this sector, this is a welcome development. Here in Fiji, people in this country have a constitutional right to clean water. So it's government's role to make that a reality. And one of the things that we have done in Fiji over the past few years, we have changed the whole infrastructure in how we provide that water, taking it direct operation of services, removing it from government, and setting up separate bodies to do this across the country. I think one of the important things for us in small island countries is to this issue that was brought up by the Minister for Economy in Fiji, that any development in the island nation is related to climate. So access to funding for development is something that that we need to relate back to climate financing. We've already had one project that is currently underway in Fiji. We were able to get access to the GCF funds together with funds from our development partners. This has been a great development for us. And it's also in our urban areas, we're able to get into this space of public and private partnership. But out in our remote areas, there's very little possibility of us getting public and private partnership. There's always going to be a challenge of making sure that water in our small remote areas where we cannot bring in public-private partnership will require the assistance of development partners, and there's a challenge of making that water clean water. A lot of our places in Fiji have water, but make it clean and safe water. This is going to be remaining a challenge for us. And as I listen to our development partners that have been speaking this evening, I look forward to the opportunity to be able to work with them, in particular for our small areas that are away from our major urban areas where we need to make sure that the water that people are getting is clean. And this is something that we hope to be able to learn from the development partners, how we can work with them to make that a reality for the people in our country. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Thanks again for putting a focus on those who are left behind. Thank you for bringing the issue also of human rights, constitutional recognition of the rights to water and sanitation. Again, I hope to see you next year in Indonesia for our sector ministers meeting, and where we will have more time. I hope that we will have at least 2 days to have more in-depth exchanges about solutions, successes, and how to overcome challenges. Thank you so much. As I told you, as you know, we are a multi-stakeholder partnership, and I am now moving on to give the floor to representatives of other sectors, of other stakeholders, sorry. So I will start with the private sector, and I would like to invite Mr. Virgilio Perry Rivera, who is the COO of the Manila Water Company. Perry, over to you.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, honorable ministers, partners in development, ladies and gentlemen, good day. I'll go straight to the point because I share with you my experience in developing and implementing projects in Southeast Asia. Manila Water being one of the leading water operators in the region. We are a product of PPP. So that's my first important point. So in coordination with the host government and also other NGOs, PPPs can play a key role in providing water and sanitation services at scale, efficiently, and we have track record in mobilizing capital resources. Number two, This will only happen if under proper governance. Effective, dynamic, consistent governance is the foundation of stable and transparent regulation. That's very important to attract capital. Number three, it is important to provide a policy environment for local innovators because they have a role to play in delivering affordable and appropriate water and sanitation service models. As we aspire to achieve universal access, we are now faced with major challenges: the global pandemic and the more catastrophic threat of climate change if this is not addressed. So in behalf of SWA private sector constituency, we'd like to leverage our experience, knowledge, and competencies in collaboration with host governments so that we will be able to share and deliver better sanitation and water for all our constituents. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Perry. I will immediately follow and give the floor to Ms. Vedika Bhandarkar, who is the Chief Global Impact Officer at water.org, and she is today representing civil society organizations. Vedika, over to you.
Thank you, Katerina. Dear Honorable Ministers, as Katerina mentioned, I'm Vedika Bhandarkar, Chief Global Impact Officer for water.org. I'm based in India, and today I'm the representative of the civil society organizations from Asia. Increased affordable financing for ensuring water, sanitation, and hygiene to all is the critical prerequisite to mounting an effective and resilient response to the COVID-19 pandemic, as these services are not only essential for preventing the spread of the pandemic, but they're also key to rebuilding livelihoods as well as economies. During this global pandemic, the most marginalized need to be our priority, as they are unfortunately the first victims of the crisis, but also very nicely, they are the first actors in the recovery. Budgeting and allocation of finances for water, sanitation, and hygiene should consider the additional and specific costs involved for meeting the special needs of these vulnerable groups. In our region, one of the key concerns is not just about having more financing, but it's also about ensuring proper allocation and effective utilization of existing financing. This can go a long way in closing the gap in financing for the water and sanitation sector and in ensuring that the finances still to be mobilized effectively reach those that need it the most. We as civil society organizations have strong connections with the communities. We have specialized expertise in participatory approaches. We have experience in contextualizing interventions to local conditions. We welcome the opportunity to partner with you to address some of these challenges by closely working with the governments at all levels, whether it's at the center, the state, the district, the city, the village, at any level. In the desire to build a positive path forward together, I will conclude by asking you, on behalf of the Asian civil society organizations, in your view, as ministers of finance, how can the CSOs best partner with you to help ensure effective, timely, and accountable use of funds, addressing the needs of those that are left behind? Thank you, and back to you, Katerina.
Thank you so much, Vedika, and sorry that your nameplate wasn't correct, but we all know who you are. And thank you so much for your intervention. And it is only now that I'm going to hand over the floor to Juliet Willits of the Institute of Technology in Sydney, and she is representing the research and learning institutions. Over to you, Juliet, to ask a question.
Thank you, Katerina, and good afternoon, ministers and other guests. As Katerina mentioned, I'm from the University of Technology in Sydney, and we joined SWA almost a decade ago because we felt that supporting analysis and learning in this important multi-stakeholder partnership was needed. The huge issues that we've heard that keep us up at night and give us headaches and are an opportunity, they need all the different stakeholders to be involved. And in this meeting, we've been talking about financing, about investment to improve services, but we shouldn't only talk about the investment. We need to talk about the effectiveness of those investments, as Vedika just mentioned. And for us, from the research and learning constituency, this is where we see our role. First, we feel that evidence from research and learning organisations can help you assess and have feedback loops on your policies and programs. You need to know whether what you're investing in is working, and our organisations can support that. For instance, in Indonesia, the incentive-based financing mechanism that you heard about earlier from Minister Lazara was assessed, and research and learning organisations provided feedback to show how that could better be adjusted to reach low-income households. Second, evidence can ensure that you target your investments and ensure that you're addressing inequalities, and that you find back out and get feedback on whether you're actually addressing inequalities. And third, evidence can help you justify increased investment in water and sanitation. It can help build public and institutional support, for instance, around the economic losses and the other benefits of water and sanitation. So we know policy making and decision making takes place in very short time frames. And so building two-way relationships with research organizations is an imperative. It means you can have very quick access to relevant evidence at the moments that you need it, just as has happened this year with COVID. And it ensures also that research and learning organizations focus their efforts to solve the knowledge gaps that you have and are most relevant for you. So the question from our constituency ministers, we'd like to ask for your response on how you think you could better enable closer involvement of research and learning institutions as key critical actors to help the sector to move forward and to ensure that the investments you make actually deliver the outcomes that we're all hoping for. We look forward to your inputs. Many thanks.
Thank you so much, Juliet. I will not keep my promise. I said we had only 2 ministers before I opened to the different stakeholders. We have 2 more, and I promise then we will move. I would like to invite the Honorable Makdoum Hashim Yaban Bakht, who is the Provincial Minister of Punjab for Finance in Pakistan, and I would like him to ask whether you can offer some reflections on what the partners have said, and or whether you have any questions, any answers to the questions raised, sir. Over to you. Okay. While the Provincial Minister of Punjab gets ready or manages to connect, let me then hand over the floor to His Excellency Lyompo Dori Chering, who is the Minister of Works and Human Settlements in Bhutan. Honorable Minister, welcome, and could you comment on WASH finance resource allocation and some of the steps or difficulties to access WASH finance in Bhutan? I was in your country 2 years ago, met with the Minister of Finance, met with your predecessor, and we had several discussions regarding the difficulties to access WASH finance. Could you share some with us, please? I think that somehow we might be having some difficulties, but I see the Honorable Doyu Chering here online. Look, let me move forward and let us not stop. Let me bring the discussion to a close. If there is, and I hear and I see that there are no technical issues happening, we are running over time, and this is the reason why we might be getting late. before I hand over to the Honorable Suharto Monoarfa from Indonesia, let me just tell you that we have a short video that we prepared, a short video where all our constituencies speak about their contribution to reaching SDG 6. I will not play the video now since we are so late, but the video will be available on social media and also on our website. Having said that, let me hand over to the Honorable Suharto Monoarfa, who is the Minister for National Development Planning of Indonesia, for some concluding remarks. Honorable Minister, over to you.
Thank you, Ibu Katarina. We do apologize that the ministers already left this meeting because of the immediate call from President. He has been here for a moment. I'm Deputy Minister. If possible, I may represent him to deliver short remarks.
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Catherine Root, High-Level Chair of SWA Global Leadership Council, Ms. Katarina de Albuquerque, SW Chief Executive Officer, and his and her Excellency Minister and Ministers of Finance, Minister of Water and Sanitation, country representatives in this Finance Ministers meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Indonesia. First of all, we would like to thank to Sanitation and Water for all for your excellent moderation of the discussion today. And we know that the water, sanitation, and hygiene is essential for life. Recognizing the importance of this sector, the government of Indonesia remains strongly committed towards achieving universal access for those services. In fact, accelerating progress in the water sector is one of the top priorities in the country's current 5 years of medium-term development plan that was initiated in 2020 and ends in 2024, and which we have closely aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals 6 targets for WAS. The WAS sector is foundational. The achievement of SDG 6 targets will also drive progress across another SDG goals related to health, education, nutrition, productivity, and the economy. Ladies and gentlemen, the participants of 2020 Finance Ministers meeting, as we heard today, better services are being delivered across the continent. There are many opportunities to make our sector more credit-worthy, more focused on results, building stronger systems and institutions, and leveraging more market finance to complement limited public funds. This is good news. We now need to learn from these experiences presented here today, as well as those showcased in the Finance Minister Handbook, and adapt them to the context in our own country. Water has been identified as a top 10 global risk by the World Economic Forum. Climate change reveals itself through the impact on the water cycle. These are huge challenges which should attract the brightest and best in our societies to find solutions and implement them. So let us rise to meet these challenges. Ultimately, if we truly want universal access to water, then we need governments to prioritize this sector, to provide strong political leadership from the highest level, and we need consistent political oversight for a number of years. This is what successful countries have done to achieve universal access. Investment in water is no-brainer, and today we have seen and discussed opportunity to mobilize that investment, often using innovative approaches, whether through public funding, repayable finance, or a mix of solutions. Therefore, in the spirit and the commitment to achieve the SDGs goal, I am delighted to announce that the government of Indonesia will host the next sector minister meeting of SWA, which will be held in the last quarter of 2021. On behalf of Minister of National Development Planning, I openly invite all sector ministers of WAS to attend this meeting. The event will be an opportunity for ministers responsible for WAS to share and learn from each other's country's experiences, and to renew and strengthen our commitment towards provision of water and sanitation for all. I wish you all the very best in this virtual finance ministers meeting, and hopefully we will warmly welcome all of you to our wonderful Indonesia next year. Minister of National Development Planning, Head of National Development Planning Agency, Suharto Manwarfa. Thank you, Ibu Katarina. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice Minister, and terima kasih. And we are looking forward to coming to your beautiful country next year. And thank you so much for the invitation, for hosting us, and for your hospitality. I think it will be a fantastic meeting. Thank you so much. Let me now go back to Minister Dorje Charing from Bhutan, who I knew I had seen was online and who is now able to take the floor. Honorable Minister, over to you, please. Can you unmute yourself, please, Honorable Minister? Cool. Yes, perfect. Thank you so much.
Sorry. Thank you, Ms. Katerina. And good afternoon from Bhutan. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and our developing partners. I'm so happy to see all our excellencies online. Though Bhutan being a very small country, yet we give lots of importance to our water and sanitation. In our country, in generally, of all our GDP, we have allotted about 4% to our wash activities. And of these, this government, the present government, we have come up with a very, very important flagship program known as Water Flagship, that is water and sanitation for all. And in fact, we have one of the highest water per capita in this region. But the issue with us is we have got a very poor management of water and sanitation and other wash activities. So that's why now we are coming up with the restructuring of our management of water and sanitation. And we are now building up our ways and forwards to have a separate agency that will purely look after the water and sanitations and other wash activities. So even the government is giving lots of importance to our wash activities, and we have allotted huge amount of our budget, our capital budget, to those activities. And lastly, I would like to say that I heard, or I got many informations from rest of our excellencies that they are also doing great things in our wash activities. And I got many informations and many ideas, and thanks to all the former speakers. And thank you, like one of our minister invited us to Indonesia, and I would like to see you, not in visual online, but I will see you by end of next year in real person. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. And we are very happy that you took some ideas from these discussions. I think that you are not alone. I hope you are not alone. And also looking forward to seeing you next year in Indonesia. We heard that Pakistan would like to take the floor. Honorable Minister, are you there now? Just wondering, I cannot see you. I cannot see you. I'm told you are there. If you are not there, let me hand over the floor to SWA's Steering Committee Chair, Dr. Patrick Moriarty, who will make the final vote of thanks. Over to you, Patrick.
Great. Thank you very much, Katerina. And wow, what a great session. I think, having listened in on all three, that this is probably the best. We kept the best for last with our finance ministers meetings. Excellencies, honourable ministers, friends and colleagues, it's a pleasure to close these, well, I was going to say 2, but nearly 3 great hours of sharing and learning. And on behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank all of our speakers. And above all, I'd like to thank you, the 20 or more ministers of finance, health, water, planning who've joined us today. And Sanitation and Water for All is nothing without our members. You've heard from them, from civil society, from research and learning, the private sector, from external support agencies. But of course, you, government, ministers, you're our most important members, and we all look to you for your leadership, which is why it's so exciting that in total, more than 70 of you have joined our series of 3 finance ministers meetings. We've heard nearly 3 hours of excellent presentations, sharing, learning, and I've been hugely impressed by the clarity of the vision and leadership that we have heard. We know that we face a huge challenge, we've heard it, in financing our shared goal of sanitation, water, and hygiene to everyone, everywhere, and forever by 2030. Yet, listening to us today, I think we can do it. I believe we can do it. We've heard from you, from your fellow ministers who are doing it. We know that there are solutions to financing the sector, to making it productive, to making it self-supporting in the end. But they'll only follow your lead. The sector is in desperate need of strong, high-level, visionary political leadership, and we look to you to provide it. We have to make the sector investable. And again, we look to your leadership in making it so. And we, all the other members of Sanitation and Water for All, commit to following your lead and supporting you in whatever ways we can, which is why creating strong and investable WASH systems and mobilizing the necessary finances are one of our strategic objectives. So thank you to everyone who joined from all over the world. Thanks to the excellent moderators, to Jyoti Shukla from the World Bank, and to our own energetic and indefatigable Katerina. And of course, thank you to our high-level chair, Kevin, whose words are always so inspirational. Thank you to Spark Street, who provided this great interactive platform, and to all of the interpreters for your work. And finally, thank you again, Katerina, and your team in SWA's Secretariat. And I'm really saying this on behalf of the whole SET partnership, the whole steering committee. You've really made us proud. You're doing a fantastic job. Thank you. So hoping to meet many of you in the flesh, face to face, next year in Indonesia, hopefully in a post-COVID world. Until then, stay safe and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you, everyone. The meeting has ended. Thank you to everyone. We will leave you with the video that we will share on social media, but we will leave it with you. Thank you so much and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Ensuring access to safe water, sanitation and hygiene will be crucial to propel the worldwide socio-economic recovery. The visionary leadership of ministers of finance in this area is now needed to help countries build forward better from the pandemic, to realize societies that are more equitable, more resilient and more sustainable, and to get the global goals firmly back on track. On the ground, in 170 countries, UNDP, the United Nations Development Programme, will continue to work closely with our partners to pool vital resources and know-how to finally end the exclusion of the poorest and most vulnerable from the most basic services.
We do lobby, advocacy and campaign to increase water, sanitation, hygiene budget for marginalized and poorest of the poor in line with the SDGs. We do also influence the Minister of the local government to increase allocation as well as proper implementation at the ground so that wash facilities can be ensured by the people and ensure their rights. On the occasion of Finance Ministers meeting as a CSO representative, I would like to humbly request all the Honorable Finance Ministers to increase allocation for water, sanitation and hygiene.
The UN Water family applauds your work and looks forward to joining forces through the SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework. Thank you and good luck with your deliberation.
Tim Wainwright from WaterAid. Clean water saves lives. Water, sanitation and hygiene is a foundational investment we need to make in order that investments in health, in education, in wider economic development do not fail. Hygiene is a perfect example of this. By investing in access to water and soap, we can prevent diseases. If we invest in the disease cure, we are failing because we're not investing in the prevention. So I call on all of you to support investments in water, sanitation and hygiene. WaterAid, for our part, we will work with the relevant ministries to develop costed plans that can be invested in for success.
The SWA's private sector partners stand for partnership and mutual accountability. Partnerships between private sector governments, civil society, research and learning. Partnerships that are built on shared objectives and firm commitments. But most importantly, we believe in action. The SWA's private sector partners are businesses that are multinational and local, big and small, from all over the world. We are here to help you and bring solutions. We want to work together to accelerate private sector capacity and skills in your country.
Ministers, please check whether your country is reporting against your SDG 6.2 goals, because many countries are not, especially on the amount of fecal waste that gets safely emptied, transported, and treated. Unless you address this critical data gap, you won't know where you stand, and we and others won't know how to best support you in achieving your SDG commitments.